The gravy boat was heavy, not with its contents, but with the weight of what swam within. Leah's hand, steady as a surgeon's, did not tremble as she placed it on the silver tray. The porcelain was a milky white, painted with tiny, cheerful bluebells, a cruel mockery of innocence. Inside, the rich brown gravy, thickened with rue and fragrant with thyme, concealed a whisper of death, a secret steeped from the crushed leaves and slender branches of the oleander that grew, bold and beautiful, behind the smokehouse. A flower, the color of a bride's blush. A flower that could stop a heart as surely as a bullet. From the swinging door of the kitchens she could see them, the Beauchamp family, arrayed at the head table like gods on their Olympus. Master Elias the patriarch, his face a collapsed ruin, held together by arrogance. His wife, a pale, silent woman who had long ago traded her voice for silks and comfort. And there, at the center, the cause of this grand affair, Thomas Beauchamp, the heir, his face flushed with wine and triumph. Beside him sat his bride, Amelia, a delicate creature from Natchez, her laughter like the tinkling of a wind chime, entirely unaware that she was marrying into a dynasty of ghosts. Leah's focus was a pinprick, a burning point of light centered on Thomas. His smug smile, the way he laid his hand possessively on Amelia's arm, the same hand that had signed the bill of sale, the same smile he'd worn as the wagon pulled away. A footman, resplendent in his livery, took the tray from her. He was new, brought in for the occasion, and did not know her face, did not see the stillness in her eyes that was not deference but a terrible calm. She watched him carry the gravy boat to the head table, watched him pour a generous, glistening stream over Thomas's sliced venison, then his father's, then the plates of the other heirs seated in places of honor. The bride thankfully waved it away, preferring her meat plain, a small, unintended mercy. Leah did not wait. She did not need to see the first convulsion, hear the first strangled gasp. She had played the scene in her mind 1,000 times, a nightly ritual of grief and rage. She knew its choreography by heart. As the orchestra in the grand hall swelled, she slipped out the back door of the kitchen, a ghost in a simple cotton dress. The humid Mississippi air, thick with the scent of magnolias and decay, enveloped her. She did not run. She walked, her bare feet silent on the packed earth, moving past the slave cabins where the sounds of a fiddle played a tune of borrowed joy. She walked towards the dark, waiting cypress swamp that bordered Belle Reve Plantation. She carried nothing with her but the ache in her womb and a lullaby in her head, a song for a child who would never hear it again. The poison was for them, but the escape, this long walk into the unknown, this was for her. For Sarah, the night was a mouth, and it swallowed her whole. The scar on her back, a gnarled map of old pain, began to throb. It always did when the past rose up to claim her. It was a single, branching lash, laid down by the overseer, Mr. Crane, 3 years ago. It had festered, healed into a keloid ruin that felt like a vine growing under her skin. She traced its familiar ridges with her fingers as she waded through the murky, knee-deep water of the swamp. The scar was Sarah's price. The day they took her, Leah had fought, not with sense, but with the raw, animal fury of a mother. She had clawed and bit and screamed until Crane's whip had silenced her, leaving her bleeding in the dust as the wagon carrying her 8-year-old daughter became a speck on the horizon. Thomas Beauchamp had watched from the veranda, sipping a glass of lemonade. He had laughed. That sound, more than the lash, was what had sealed his fate. Now the sounds of the swamp were a symphony of menace and sanctuary. The guttural croak of bullfrogs, the incessant thrum of cicadas, the splash of something unseen in the black water. She moved by instinct, following the faint starlight that filtered through the canopy of Spanish moss. The plantation world, with its rigid lines of cotton rows and fenced-in pastures, was gone. Here, Everything was tangled, chaotic, and alive, like the rage in her heart. She thought of the oleander. She had learned of its power from old Elspeth, the midwife and root woman who had died the winter before. Elspeth's hands were as gnarled as cypress roots, but they knew the secrets of the earth. "Some things are for healing, Leah," she had whispered, her voice a dry rustle of leaves, "and some are for justice. The Lord gives us all manner of tools. It's the heart that decides their purpose." Elspeth had shown her the plant, its deceptively lovely blossoms. "Every part of it is a final word," she'd said, "a conversation ender." Leah had tended the bush for a year, watering it, pruning it, speaking to it in the quiet of the pre-dawn hours. It was her secret garden of vengeance. She knew its bitter smell, the milky sap that oozed from a broken stem. It had become a part of her, an extension of her grief. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. Sarah, her hair in two neat braids, holding up a June bug she'd caught, its iridescent shell gleaming. Her laughter, a sound Leah's mind had worn smooth with remembering. She stumbled, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. The water was cold against her skin. The grief was a physical thing, a stone in her belly. She pressed on. The lullaby began in her mind, a phantom hum. "Go to sleep, little one. Go to sleep. Mama's here. The moon is deep." She had sung it every night of Sarah's life. Now it was a prayer to a ghost. Back at Belle Reve, the beautiful dream had become a charnel house. The first to fall was Thomas. One moment he was raising a toast, his face beaming. The next his glass was shattering on the floor. His eyes bulged. His hand clawed at his collar. A terrible, strangled sound escaped his lips before he pitched forward, his face landing in his plate of half-eaten venison. Panic erupted. Women screamed. Men shouted for a doctor. But it was too late. Before anyone could make sense of the chaos, old Master Elias clutched his chest, his face turning a ghastly shade of purple. He slid from his chair, a dead weight, his fall knocking over a candelabra that sent a spray of hot wax across the fine tablecloth. Two of Thomas's cousins, seated nearby, were next, writhing on the floor, their bodies seized by violent convulsions. The wedding feast had become a festival of death. The bride, Amelia, sat frozen, a porcelain doll of horror, her white dress splattered with wine and the vomit of a dying man. It took them nearly an hour, in the pandemonium, to realize the cook was missing. By the time Silas Crane, the overseer, organized a search party, Leah was miles away. Crane was a man carved from hardwood, his face a collection of sharp angles and suspicion. He didn't need a confession to know. He went straight to the kitchens. The room was still warm, smelling of roasted meat and yeast. It was pristine, scrubbed, clean. Too clean. But Crane's eyes missed nothing. Behind the woodpile near the outdoor oven he found it. A small pile of stripped oleander leaves and stems, hastily discarded. He picked one up, crushed it between his thick fingers, and brought it to his nose. The faint, bitter almond scent was unmistakable. His lip curled into a snarl. It was her. The quiet one. The one who never met his eye, but whose presence he always felt. A pool of still, deep water. He gathered the hounds, their bays echoing across the panicked estate. He assembled a dozen men, armed with rifles and torches that cut jagged holes in the darkness. The hunt was on. The first entry in Silas Crane's logbook, dated the following morning, was written in a precise, angry script. Names June 14th, 1858. The boy, Thomas, is dead. Master Elias, also. 2 cousins, God knows their names. All from poison. The cook, Leah, has fled. Found oleander by the ovens. She is clever. Went into the cypress swamp to throw off the dogs. Lost her trail at the water's edge. Sent riders to Vicksburg and Natchez. A bounty will be posted. $500. I will have her head on a pike. She will not see another sunrise as a free woman. Angel. The bounty poster went up within 2 days, nailed to the courthouse doors in Vicksburg, to trading posts along the river, to the trunks of trees at every major crossroads. $500 reward, wanted for the ACT of murder and insurrection. The negress, Leah, formerly the property of the late Elias Beauchamp, Esquire, approximately 30 years of age, 5 feet 4 inches in height, of slight build, complexion, mulatto, has a noticeable scar on her left cheek and a more significant, branching scar across her back. Answers to her name but is cunning and deceitful. Known to be an expert cook. Believed to have poisoned her master and his heirs at a wedding banquet. The above reward will be paid for her capture and delivery to Silas Crane at Belle Reve Plantation, or for proof of her demise. Be warned, she is dangerous. Leah, of course, did not see the posters. She was living in a world beyond paper and ink, a primal world of instinct and survival. She emerged from the swamp after 2 days, caked in mud, her dress in tatters, her body a feast for mosquitoes. But she was alive. The sun felt alien on her skin. She was in unfamiliar territory, a landscape of rolling hills and small, hard-scrabble farms owned by poor whites who would shoot a strange Negro on sight. Fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in her stomach. Every snapping twig was a patroller. Every barking dog was Crane's hounds. She moved only at night, navigating by the North Star, which she'd learned to identify from a kind old man who had once been a river pilot. During the day, she hid. In dense thickets, in hollow logs, in the abandoned ruins of a sharecropper's cabin. She ate what she could find. Wild berries she knew were safe. Grubs she dug from rotting wood. The raw flesh of a frog she managed to catch. Hunger was a dull, constant ache, but it was nothing compared to the agony of her memories. In the fevered haze of exhaustion, Sarah was with her. She would see her daughter's face in the patterns of leaves, hear her voice in the rustle of the wind. The lullaby was her mantra, the only thing that kept the screaming terror at bay. Go to sleep, little one. She sang it to herself, a hoarse whisper in the suffocating silence of her hiding places. It was a song of love, but now it was also a song of war. It was the reason the Beauchamps were dead. It was the reason she was running. One afternoon, hiding in a thicket of blackberry bushes, she watched a family of white farmers pass on a wagon. A little girl with hair the color of corn silk sat on her mother's lap, playing with a rag doll. The sight was a physical blow. Leah pressed her face into the dirt, her body shaking with silent sobs. It was not just her daughter she was mourning. It was the very idea of motherhood, a right that had been stolen from her, sold for $450 in a ledger book. The scar on her back burned. It was a brand, a permanent declaration that she was property. But they had misjudged her. They had marked her body, but they had not broken her mind. They had taken her child, but they had not extinguished the fire of her love. That fire had simply changed its nature, from a warming hearth to a consuming inferno. The oleander was merely the wood she had used to feed it. Weeks turned into a month. Leah learned the rhythms of the land. She became a creature of shadows, her senses honed to a razor's edge. She could smell rain on the air hours before it fell. She could distinguish the sound of a deer from the sound of a man. Her body grew leaner, harder. The soft flesh of a house servant was burned away, leaving behind muscle and sinew. The scar on her cheek, a small crescent moon from a childhood fall, seemed more prominent on her gaunt face. She was moving north, always north. The word was a prayer. Canada, a place she could only imagine, a land of snow and true freedom. But it was a distant dream. First, she had to cross Mississippi, then Tennessee, then Kentucky. It was a journey of 1,000 miles, each one fraught with peril. One night, driven by a desperate thirst, she crept towards a small cabin. She could hear the soft strains of a hymn being sung inside. It was a Negro cabin. Hope and fear warred within her. These people could be her salvation or her downfall. Many enslaved people, promised a small reward or fearing punishment, would turn in a runaway without a second thought. But some would help. She watched for a long time from the edge of the woods. An old woman came out to the porch, her face lined with a century of weariness. She looked out into the darkness, not with fear, but with a kind of knowing patience. "You can come on out now, child." The woman's voice was low and steady. "The dogs ain't been by here for a week. You must be thirsty." Leah's heart hammered against her ribs. She stayed frozen in the shadows. "I ain't gonna hurt you," the woman said. "I'm Aunt Hetty. My man and me. We live here. We mind our own business. But the good Lord tells us to give water to the thirsty." Slowly, hesitantly, Leah emerged. Hetty's eyes took in her ragged clothes, her wild hair, the desperate look on her face. She nodded slowly. "You, one of the lost ones. Come, get some water." Inside the tiny cabin, a man sat by the fire, his hands busy mending a fishing net. He looked up, his eyes holding no surprise, only a deep, bottomless sorrow. Hetty gave Leah a gourd of cool well water, the best thing she had ever tasted. She gave her a piece of cornbread, and Leah devoured it, trying not to weep with gratitude. They didn't ask for her name, they didn't ask where she came from, they didn't need to. The news of the Beauchamp poisoning had traveled on the wind, a whispered legend among the enslaved. They called her the Vicksburg Angel, or the Oleander Woman, a figure of terrifying, righteous power. "They're looking for a woman," Hetty said, her voice neutral. "From down Vicksburg way, saying she laid the masters low." Leah said nothing, her eyes fixed on the fire. "Man named Crane is leading the hunt," the old man, Jonah, added, his voice a low rumble. "Mean as a snake. He's got posters everywhere. Says the woman has a mark on her back." "Like a vine." Leah flinched. The scar. It was her signature, her curse. Hetty placed a gentle hand on her arm. "The river is your best chance. Head for the big one. There are folks, friends, who can help you get on a steamboat heading north. But you gotta be careful. The river is full of hunters." They let her sleep by the hearth for a few hours. Before dawn, Hetty gave her a piece of dried meat and a small bundle of cloth containing a poultice for her insect bites. "God go with you, child," she said, her eyes filled with a fierce, unspoken understanding. "You doin' the Lord's work, or the devil's. Sometime it's hard to tell the difference." Jonah walked her to the edge of the woods. "Follow this creek," he instructed, pointing with his chin. "It'll lead you to the Yazoo River. Follow it down to where it meets the Mississippi. Be watchful." Leah wanted to thank them, but the words stuck in her throat. She simply nodded, a deep, profound gratitude in her eyes. As she turned to leave, she began to hum, unconsciously, the first few bars of her lullaby. Hetty, standing on the porch, heard it. Her eyes widened, and a slow, sad smile touched her lips. She knew. The news from Belle Rive reached the surrounding plantations through a network of rumor and veiled gossip. A letter from a neighboring planter's wife to her sister in Charleston captured the tone of fear and disbelief. "Dearest Martha, asterisk, you will scarcely believe the horror that has befallen our county. The Beauchamps are all but destroyed, Elias, his son Thomas, and 2 nephews all dead in a single evening. At the boy's own wedding feast. They say it was poison, a most savage and unnatural act. The culprit, it is believed, is one of their own house servants, a cook named Leah, who has since vanished, as if into thin air. A bounty of $500 is on her head, but she is like a phantom. Mr. Crane, their overseer, a most determined man, has been hunting her for weeks to no avail. It has cast a pall over us all, There is a new and unsettling quiet in our people, a watchfulness in their eyes I have never seen before. It is as if they are all holding their breath, waiting. We have doubled the patrols and locked our doors at night. One begins to wonder who can be trusted. Who among these silent, smiling faces might be nursing a serpent in their heart? Pray for us, Martha. We are living in a state of siege. The siege was internal for Leah. Her journey along the Yazoo was a descent into a fever dream. The humidity was a wet blanket, the air thick with the smell of mud and rot. She saw moccasins slip silently through the water, their heads leaving V-shaped wakes. Alligators, looking like half-submerged logs, watched her with ancient, reptilian eyes. The world was stripped down to its essentials: water, hunger, fear, and the relentless, driving need to move north. One evening, crouched in a canebrake, she saw a patrol boat moving slowly up the river. On the deck, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood a tall, lean figure, Silas Crane. Even from a distance, she knew his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders. He held a rifle in the crook of his arm, and he scanned the riverbank with an unnerving intensity, as if he could feel her, watching him. Her blood ran cold. He was still out there, relentless. The close call sharpened her fear, but also her resolve. She began to think of him not as a man, but as a force of nature, a thing to be outwitted. She was no longer just prey. She was a survivor. She remembered Elspeth's words. It's the heart that decides their purpose. Her heart, once shattered by grief, was being forged into something hard and sharp in the crucible of this flight. The lullaby changed, too. It was no longer just a song of mourning. It became a weapon. When her courage wavered, she would hum it. Go to sleep, little one. It was a reminder of why she had done it, of the justice she had delivered. The tune became intertwined with the scent of oleander in her memory, a strange and potent synesthesia of love and death. The song was for Sarah. The poison was for Thomas. They were two sides of the same coin. She finally reached the confluence, where the muddy Yazoo surrendered itself to the immense, churning power of the Mississippi. It was a terrifying and majestic sight. The river was a mile wide, a moving continent of brown water carrying trees and debris on its current. Vicksburg, the city she had fled, was a smudge of smoke and buildings on the bluffs to the south. The river was the great artery of the South, teeming with steamboats, flatboats, and keelboats. It was a highway of commerce, carrying cotton to the world and misery to the people who picked it. For her, it was a path to freedom, but a path guarded by 1,000 dragons. Hetty's words came back to her. There are folks, friends, how to find them, who to trust. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and Crane's hounds would be upon her. She found her way to the under-the-hill district of Vicksburg, a notorious stretch of waterfront filled with groggeries, brothels, and gambling dens. It was a chaotic, dangerous place, but its very lawlessness offered a kind of camouflage. Here, a woman on her own might be overlooked. She pulled her ragged shawl over her head, keeping her face in shadow, and moved through the teeming crowds of rivermen, merchants, and slaves. She was looking for a sign. A symbol Hetty had described to her, a quilt hanging on a clothesline with a specific pattern, a log cabin design with a black square at its center. It was a signal for the Underground Railroad, a subtle message that this was a safe house. For 2 days she haunted the waterfront, sleeping in alleys, stealing scraps of food. The bounty posters were everywhere, their stark lettering a constant accusation. She saw her own face, a crude woodcut that looked nothing and everything like her, staring out from a post office wall. The word made her want to laugh. They had no idea what dangerous was. Dangerous was a mother with nothing left to lose. On the 3rd day she saw it, hanging from the balcony of a small, nondescript boarding house. A quilt flapped in the breeze. A log cabin pattern. A black square in the middle. Her heart leaped. She watched the house for hours, her stomach in knots. Finally, as dusk settled, she gathered her courage and approached the back door. She gave the coded knock Jonah had taught her. Shave and a haircut. The door opened a crack. A black man's face, stern and wary, peered out. "What you want?" "I'm looking for a friend," Leah whispered, her voice hoarse. "A friend of Jonah's." The man's eyes flickered with recognition. He opened the door wider and pulled her inside. The house was run by a free black couple, Samuel and Esther. They were conductors on the railroad, risking their own freedom to help others find theirs. They gave her food, clean clothes, and a small room in the attic. "You're the one from Belle Rive," Samuel said. It wasn't a question. Leah nodded, her gaze steady. Esther, a woman with kind, sad eyes, touched the scar on Leah's cheek. "The whole river is talking about you," she said softly. "Some say you're a demon sent from hell. Others say you're an angel of vengeance." "I'm a mother," Leah said, the words simple and devastating. They understood. She stayed with them for a week, hidden away in the attic, listening to the sounds of the city and the mournful whistles of the steamboats. They told her that Crane had been in Vicksburg, asking questions, showing the poster, his frustration mounting with every passing day. He knew she was close. He could feel it. The city was a net, and he was slowly pulling it tight. "We have to get you on a boat north," Samuel said. "The Starlight. It leaves for Cincinnati in 2 days. We have a contact, one of the colored crewmen. He can hide you in the cargo hold." The plan was set. The night of the Starlight's departure was thick with fog, a gift from the river. Samuel disguised Leah as an old man, dressing her in baggy overalls, a wide-brimmed hat, and rubbing soot on her face to darken her skin and hide her features. As they crept through the labyrinthine alleys towards the docks, the fog swirled around them, muffling sounds, turning the gaslights into blurry, spectral orbs. They were 50 yards from the gangplank when they heard the baying. Hounds. Leah's blood turned to ice. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and unmistakable. Silas Crane. He wasn't alone. He had a posse of men with him, their faces grim in the torchlight. They had been tipped off. "Run!" Samuel hissed, pushing her towards the shadows between 2 stacks of cotton bales. He turned to face Crane, a brave and foolish attempt to create a diversion. Leah didn't hesitate. She ran. Her lungs burned, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. The barking was getting closer. A shout went up. "There she is!" She scrambled over crates and ropes, her pursuers close behind. The docks were a maze of obstacles. She could hear Crane's voice, a low snarl, urging his men on. She reached the end of a long pier. Behind her, the torches and the dogs. In front of her, the vast, black, churning river. There was nowhere else to go. Crane stepped out of the fog, his face a mask of triumphant hatred. "It's over, Leah," he said, his voice deceptively calm. He raised his rifle. $500. Dead or alive. Leah stood at the edge of the pier, her chest heaving. She looked not at Crane, but past him into the swirling mist. She saw Sarah's face, smiling. She heard the lullaby, not as a whisper, but as a chorus, rising above the barking of the dogs and the shouting of the men. "Go to sleep, little one, go to sleep." The scar on her back felt as if it were on fire, a searing brand of defiance. The oleander's bitter scent filled her senses, a phantom perfume of her one great act. She was not the property of Elias Beauchamp. She was not the prey of Silas Crane. She was Sarah's mother, and she was free. She gave Crane a look, not of fear, but of pity. Then, with a final, deep breath, she turned and leaped into the cold, unforgiving embrace of the Mississippi River. The torches rushed to the edge. The men peered into the black water, but she was gone. The powerful current had already claimed her, pulling her under, carrying her away into the darkness. Silas Crane stood for a long time, staring at the spot where she had disappeared. He had been cheated of his prize. The river had taken her, but it had not been his victory. In the end, she had chosen her own fate. He never found a body. Epilogue 1938 A young folklorist from the Federal Writers Project sits on the porch of a cabin in the Mississippi Delta, a few miles from the ruins of what was once Belle Reve. He's interviewing an elderly woman named Patience, her skin like wrinkled parchment, her eyes cloudy with cataracts but still sharp with memory. "Tell me about the spirits of this place," the young man says, his pencil poised over his notebook. Patience takes a long pull from her corncob pipe. "Ain't so many spirits," she says, her voice a low crackle. "But there's stories. Stories are stronger than spirits." "What kind of stories?" "You ever hear of the Oleander woman?" she asks, a glint in her eye. The young man shakes his head. "Happened a long time ago, before the surrender. There was a woman, a cook, up at the Beauchamp place. They sold her little girl down the river. On the day the young master was to be married, she served him and all his kin a final supper, sent them all straight to hell, right from their own dinner table." The folklorist scribbles furiously. "What happened to her?" Patience smiles, a slow, knowing, almost toothless grin. "Ah, now that's the story, ain't it? The overseer, he hunted her, chased her all the way to the Vicksburg docks. They say he cornered her, but before he could lay a hand on her, she turned herself into a great black bird and flew away north. Others say she dove into the river, and a great catfish, big as a boat, swallowed her up and carried her to the free lands in its belly." She leans forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But my grandma, she worked in the fields at Belle Reve. She told me the truth of it. She said that for years after, whenever a slave catcher or a mean overseer got his due, found dead in a ditch, or struck by lightning, or kicked in the head by a mule, the folks would find a single pink oleander blossom laid on the ground nearby. A calling card. So you think she survived?" the young man asks, intrigued. Patience taps her pipe on the porch rail. "Ain't about survivin', son. It's about livin' on. Her body might be in the river mud, but her story? Her story's free. It walks this land. And it reminds folks that even the prettiest flower can have the deadliest root." She closes her eyes and begins to hum a simple, haunting tune, a melody the folklorist has never heard before, but one that feels ancient and deeply sad. "Go to sleep, little one. Go to sleep." Epilogue 2019 A genealogist in Chicago clicks through digitized archives. Her client, a woman tracing her family history, has hit a wall. Her great-great-grandmother, Sarah, was adopted by a kind Quaker family in Ohio in 1859. There are no records of her before that, only a note in a family Bible, found near the riverbank, a child of Providence. Sarah grew up, married, had children, and lived a long life. She never spoke of her past, but her descendants say she had one strange habit. She refused to have oleander bushes anywhere in her garden, claiming their scent gave her a headache. And every night, she sang a particular lullaby to her children and grandchildren, a song of unknown origin that has been passed down through the generations. The genealogist cross-references manifests, runaway ads, and slave sale records. It's a long shot. But then she finds it. A bill of sale from a Vicksburg trader dated 1855. Sold, one girl, Sarah, aged 8, sound of limb from the Beauchamp estate. Her heart quickens. She keeps digging, pulling up the story of the infamous Belle Reve poisoning. She finds a digital copy of the bounty poster for a woman named Leah. The pieces click into place. The sold child, the avenging mother, the escape. She stares at the screen, at the two separate histories that are now irrevocably linked, the mother who became a myth and the daughter who lived. Leah never made it to the free lands, but in a way, her desperate act had worked. By destroying the Beauchamps, by running, by disappearing into the river and into legend, she had severed the chain of ownership. She had set her daughter free, a ghost ship, launched into a new life. The genealogist thinks of the lullaby, a thread of love and memory woven through a century and a half of silence, a song that crossed the river even if the singer did not. The river holds its secrets. It swallows names and histories, burying them in silt and time. But some things refuse to be erased. A mother's rage is a powerful current. A daughter's memory is a persistent tide. Justice, in a world built on injustice, is not a clean and simple thing. Sometimes it is a quiet, beautiful flower, growing in plain sight, waiting for a desperate hand. Sometimes it is a dish served at a wedding feast. And sometimes it is a leap into the dark, a final, defiant choice, not between life and death, but between bondage and a freedom so absolute it can only be found in the depths of the water, or in the eternity of a story. The oleander still grows wild along the bluffs of Vicksburg, its pink blossoms opening to the sun, a silent, beautiful testament to a poison that was also, in its own terrible way, an antidote.